Welcome to Grail Country. We come to you this morning we decided to have a conversation to kind of put a little bow on our Meditations on Matero series. Although I think you probably haven't heard the last from us on Meditations on Matero. We may revisit portions of the text with other folks, because I know I just was messaging John Vervaeke recently, and he let me know that he had picked up a copy of Meditations on Matero. So maybe we might have some future conversations with different folks on at least portions of Meditations on Matero.
Cool.
There's some things I would like actually, I know there are some things I would like to discuss with Jordan Daniel Wood too, particularly the stuff around evolution, because he's been reading a lot of Teilhard de Chardin lately, and to talk about some of the things that Talmberg says in Meditations on Matero and how it connects to Chardin's work might be an interesting thing to talk to Jordan about. So I think there may be some future additional conversations, but this is the official end of the series. This is our wrap party.
Speaking of Teilhard, I have received so much shit from people for mentioning him in two of my books.
Yeah.
You did?
Tradies, in fact, you know who was really
They
perplexed?
hate him.
That guy, Wolfgang Smith.
Yeah.
He liked it. He's really good friends with one of my publishers. And he goes, and he said, my publisher sent me this long email. Like, Wolfgang said, this is a remarkable text. But what's he talking about Teilhard for?
Right in the middle of a live stream, too. No, Shari, looks like you're there. Is it just Michael that froze?
Michael's not frozen for me.
Oh, really?
Not frozen for me either.
Oh.
No.
Michael, can you hear me at all?
Yeah. I can hear you.
Okay, weird. I lost you entirely. So you were talking about, the last thing I heard was you mentioning the name of Wolfgang Smith.
Yes. Well, Wolfgang Smith sent an email. Well, he's friends with one of my publishers.
Okay.
Well, actually, both of them. And he sent a long email after the Submerged Reality came out, saying how much he liked the book, except what's with it? What's he playing around with Teilhard for?
Yeah, okay, let's talk about Teilhard, because Pigeon also hates Teilhard. So, I like Jonathan.
Tranny type hate him, yeah.
Yeah, and I want to understand why people that hate Teilhard hate Teilhard. What do you think it is about Teilhard that they hate so much?
I don't know. I don't know. It perplexes me I think because he was put on the index, or is it because of the
Let me ask you a pointed question. Do you think they've understood Teilhard properly, or do you think they understand what they're reacting to is a caricature of Teilhard that they?
That's usually the case most of the time.
Well, I don't like to ascribe that, because Pigeon is a smart, very, very smart man.
True.
So I don't want to say well, no, he just doesn't understand Teilhard. Maybe there's something he sees that I'm not seeing. I'm perfectly willing. Maybe there's a legitimate reason.
Well,
but I started reading Teilhard quite young, when I was still in high school, and Teilhard Teilhard was the first Christian thinker who I found interesting in a very long time. Actually reading Teilhard as a teenager was definitely one of the things that was the beginning of my process that would allow me to find myself back in Christianity. It's Teilhard was a big part of that.
Well, I think, and I don't know, I'm not saying this is the case with Wolfgang and Jonathan do.
There's a connection here. I'm wondering, is there something? They are both both of them are Christians that have a strong association with the traditionalist school.
Right.
So is there something about the traditionalist schools?
They hate him. I don't know why they hate him, but they hate him. But I don't. The thing is, like you, Nate, I don't read ideologically, right? And I don't have to check in with the peer group to see if it's okay to read somebody.
Right.
And like you, I was not a teenager, but I was in my early 20s when I first read him. Right. And my take on him is, wow, what a beautiful writer.
Right. Yeah.
He writes. His prose is poetry.
Yeah. And yes, exactly. He's a poet.
Yeah.
He's a poet, and he's a poetic thinker.
How that? Yeah,
right.
And some people just don't get
What's
that.
actually funny, I think it's the same people who hate him hate me. Like you, and some guy on.
And someone, yeah. Oh yeah, he hates Teilhard.
All he needs is a girlfriend and a job. I'm just saying.
For real. No, seriously. I'm so much. I actually like him. Believe it or not. I like him. I like him because I appreciate the fact, like, first of all, he intrigues me. It's like, why do you listen to us so much if you hate us so much?
Well, that is weird.
Right? And then the second thing is like, he's honest. And he's very honest, and I appreciate that. And he's also like, he's pretty well read. Although
it's in like the ortho bro way of being.
Well, like the Anglican equivalent thereof. Because he is actually an Anglican.
I thought he was Catholic.
He's a super conservative Anglo-Catholic Anglican.
Anglo-Catholic, yeah. That's what I understood.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about Chardin, like nothing, except what I've read here, just quotes. So can you guys give me like a short bio? Like, was he a priest?
And a paleontologist.
A Jesuit priest.
Okay. And a paleontologist.
And a paleontologist. Oh, interesting.
And a structure bearer in World War I.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So
and poetic in nature.
Super yeah, Shari. Just go read Mass on the World.
Okay.
Well, maybe what they don't like is in the divine milieu. The argument is about the Omega point, right?
Yeah.
That all things are heading toward to be transfigured in Christ. And I actually had
it might be the universalism because those types don't tend to like universalism.
Right. Well, and the other thing is, which is surprising to me with Jonathan, because my late pastor from the Byzantine Catholic Church, who was actually Greek and grew up in the Greek Orthodox Church, the son and grandson of priests, he said the Orthodox don't have a problem with Teilhard. It's Catholics who have a problem with it. I said, what do you think that is? He says, all he's talking about is theosis.
Yeah.
And that is what he's talking about.
Well, but I mean,
I think
suspicious of him, even though he's Orthodox, though. So not all Orthodox.
Well, but Jonathan comes from an evangelical Baptist background, right?
That's true.
And I think what happens is, and you see this also. I mean, I'm not ripping on Jonathan, but you do see this, and I have seen this over many years, that people, converts in particular, who either get into a kind of conservative or traditional Catholicism or Anglicanism or Orthodoxy, bring their ecclesial habits with them, right? And there's a tendency, and I was like this, but I didn't really grow up in a conservative environment. There is a tendency through that kind of enthusiasm to, not only that you converted to the church, but you're actually trying to get the church to convert to you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I think that happens. And I think I don't know how old Jonathan is, but I know I'm a lot older than he is.
Yeah.
And I can see when I see people like that, I see them all in, I'm just doing the whole thing. I'm doing all the fasting and all. I get that, right? And because I see myself in it. But in fact, I don't know if you guys noticed this morning on Twitter, I had posted yesterday something about when some of the Eastern Orthodox were still all in on masking and the vax thing, and you can't come to church unless you've been vaxxed, and it's like Pope Francis is, it's an act of love, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was surprised, and I dropped that, and a bunch of Orthodox people started chiming in and saying, yes, talk about betrayal, and they're still like this, and they haven't apologized yet.
Yeah.
And where I'm going is that you get this kind of, we can even call it soft fundamentalism for the convert, right? You just want to get it right. You're enthusiastic. You want to get it right. You want to convert everybody, right? But for me, the older I've gotten, the more I've gone, no. And then what happened over COVID, I said, well, no, this is wrong. house church.
I definitely have seen a lot of the kind of thing that you're talking about. Like there's this guy on Twitter who like just basically trolls us nonstop, trolls Real Country nonstop, and he's one of those types.
Well, it sounds like you, right?
Yeah, well, Anselman, I get the impression he's been in the Anglo-Catholic tradition his whole life. Actually, he's Scottish. Mm-hmm. And he's just always been there. So Anselman is just the arch conservative, and he's a very left-brained person. And so, I mean, I don't think he can help thinking about things the way he can. I really don't. I just don't think, like, cognitively, he just, like, that's how his brain works.
I got two words.
Just like a hyper left-brained, very rule-focused person.
I got 2 words for him.
What's that?
Dale Carnegie. Influence people, right?
You know, I would. Right. I've had lots of interactions with Anselman, and I try to take his critique.
I completely agree.
I try to take Anselman's critique to heart, and try and just because I've known him for so long. I mean, known him in the comment section for so long, and he's become, in my mind, Braveheart.
You know, the thing about Anselman is
I heard he was Scottish.
So here's the thing: is I just said the thing about it being hyper left brain, but even that is like reductive, because Anselman will sometimes surprise you. He'll say something. He'll surprise you sometimes by saying something that isn't strictly speaking orthodox and is like kind of a little bit on the fringes, and you kind of go like
all the time. He budges all the time, incrementally.
Right, and also his love of poetry.
Yes,
his love of poetry.
I have limited experience of him.
Yeah, no, we have a lot more experience of him. He's got some.
He's endearing. I like him.
Yeah, I really do like him. I really do like him.
Similar to the way people have a kind of knee-jerk reaction to Teilhard, a certain stripe of person.
Right.
A certain stripe of person also has a knee-jerk reaction to c'est moi. And right?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, they're
right.
And the only way, I think, honestly, the only way to help people get past those things is to just keep showing them, right?
Well, but here's the thing, though. But here's the thing.
Not shoving it in their face, kind of showing them, but like manifesting something that is good and true and beautiful. That's what I mean.
Right.
Okay. Whatever. By the way, we haven't mentioned this. So last weekend, I got to hang out with Nate in person, in the flesh.
Yeah, I'm so envious.
We said it would have been great if you were there, Shari. Believe.
That's right. But here's the thing: this has been bothering me all week. So now I have a sense of Nate's person, height, girth, flavor. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And Nate cooked a fantastic meal for us at this.
I heard about that.
But here's the thing. I thought we could have a little contest right now. Maybe you already know, Nate. I think Nate and I both have to guess how Shari's height.
Oh, Shari is 5'4".
I was going to say 5'6". What do you got, sister?
5'4".
What did you real? Whoa!
I cheat. No, John. Okay, so Michael, this is a cheat code. She's mentioned it to me before, and I don't forget, and I almost never forget numbers.
And I have hobbit feet. My feet are like.
Oh, really?
I don't have any hair on my toes, but I have big, wide hobbit feet. Yeah. And I married a man with hobbit feet, and our poor children. Oh my God. We don't have long feet. Like, we're both size 8. And, but my kids, like my son is, I don't know what it is, 13 or 14, but his feet are like flippers because they're so long. And my daughter is size 10. For a woman, that's a lot, right? And she also has really wide feet. I used to tease my son and say, you know, they'll never let you join the swim team because you have an advantage.
So Shari, hopefully one of these days you guys will also get to meet my son in the flesh. He's a size 15 quad E.
Wow. He'll never fall down.
He's also 6'5". So
all of this is in Meditations on the Tarot. This is what letter?
Yeah, absolutely. It's on page 638. Right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a rap party, so I mean, I think the important thing that about Meditations on the Tarot that we've said so far is that I think is that we're not done with it, right? Well, Michael, how many times have you read the book now?
I can't even guess.
Right.
10, maybe.
And
are you still getting new?
Do you feel like you're done with it and you'll never have to look at it again?
No. I mean, every time I find stuff, right? That's what a great text does.
Yeah.
It never tires of telling you things.
Well,
right?
it's jam-packed. Like, the one reading of it already told me that I maybe got like a sixth of what he's talking about.
Well, right. And I think the fact that so many other people in this little corner of the internet are now reading it too.
Well,
so we're trendsetters, by the way. Congratulations. But I found out at the conference that Spencer Clavin has started to read it. Joe is reading it. Vervaeke told me he just bought it. So.
And Pajot is reading it.
Yeah, Pajot started reading it. Yeah.
But Joe and Spencer, actually, they've done a couple Twitter spaces or X spaces, whatever it's called now, on that. And it was interesting because you weren't there, but Friday when we all got in, we were at the monastery where we're staying, and we're in the conference room, or whatever they call it. But we whatever they call it, we were drinking martinis there. And they were talking about that and how mind-blowing it is for them to read this book for the first time. They're like, I remember when I read it for the first time, I'm like, whoa, is this Catholic? What is this? I don't know what this is. And it was liberating for me because I went through Catholic education. And when I read it the first time, it made me reevaluate what it means to be Catholic. It opened up the rest of, when Jesus says, in my Father's house there are many mansions. Mm-hmm. Well, I'd only been exposed to one mansion my whole life.
Yeah, I was just thinking of that. I was just thinking of that joke about the guy at the gates, and St. Peter says to him, he says he's a Baptist or something, and then St. Peter says, "Oh, shh. Over there are the Catholics, and over there are they think they're the only people here."
Yeah, that's right.
Don't let them know. Yeah. Well, when I was reading Hans Urs von Balthasar's Afterword, and he was showing quite well in a succinct way how all these traditions get pulled in, the Kabbalistic, mm-hmm. and the Egyptian and Greek thought and paganism, and all of this gets drawn into the book. He also talks about how the fathers did that. Origin he mentions specifically. Mm-hmm. And my first thought was there's this annoying little portion of the Gospels about these three wise men from the East.
Yeah.
That should give everyone pause, actually. Really. Like it when I remember when I first realized what it was.
They were astrologers, yeah.
Yeah. I was like, wait a minute. What are they doing here?
Right.
It's funny. That's actually the fact that you mentioned that is interesting. That's actually super salient to me because I have not uploaded it yet. But I just recorded the latest episode of the, as you know, Michael and I have been going through Owen Barfield's Romanticism Comes of Age, and the conversation we just had was on the essay East and West from Romanticism Comes of Age, and that's what you have in that story. Mm-hmm. Is you have the East and the strange of the East and the strange of the West coming together, and mm-hmm. they come together. Where do they come together? in Christ. And that's exactly essentially what Tom Berg is doing in this book is like all of the wisdom, all of the spiritual wisdom through all the world. You do not need to be afraid of it as a Christian because it all comes together under Christ. And if Christ is your center and your focus, it can only enrich you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and that's, part, when I first read Meditations of the Tarot, giving me context. And I started to understand myself because I think Tom Berg, in this book, is grounded in a kind of late medieval, early modern, enchanted Catholic sensibility, right? And to me, that's pre-scientific revolution sensibility, and which you also see, because I got my doctorate in early modern English literature, you also see it in Thomas Traherne and Henry Vaughan in particular, where they tried, and this is what, there's so many critiques of science in this book because just like Rudolf Steiner and Goethe before him, and Henry and Thomas Vaughan before them, he's trying to restore an integral vision of human intellectual endeavor.
Right, but Michael, it's important that it's a particular kind of mode of doing sciencey critiquing. And this is why, this brings us back to Chardin, and why we spent so much time talking about Chardin, is because he sees Chardin as continuing in like a way of doing science by another path, right?
Right.
Which Goethe and Steiner are also a part of. So it's like we don't like, and this, which of course ties back exactly to like what I was talking about with Barfield and East and West, because this is like Barfield is trying to point us in the same direction too. Like the road to final participation cannot be just a simple return to the past, right? Like, so it's like no one wants to do away with science. It's like no. We have to find a better way of doing science that is more integrative of the entirety of what a human being is, and not looking at the world through one eye.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
We need stereo.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think that's actually East and West are symbolic of spirituality and science?
Well, in the essay East and West, what Barfield points out is that the East has always been more connected to the spiritual unity and had less of a developed ego consciousness. So that when the yogi is able to say, I am that, the emphasis is on the I am that. And when the Western philosopher poet comes into a recognition of that consciousness of its connection to all things, the emphasis is precisely the opposite. Which the philosopher poet of the West never doubted, because we have such a strong sense of that ego center, and that.
That reminds me, you got to wonder if Tom Berg ever met Owen Barfield.
Yeah, I've thought about that. Well,
he
met Steiner, didn't
they?
They
were contemporaries.
They're contemporaries, and they're both in I cannot say that.
Young guys.
That's the one thing that Anselman does that bothers me more than anything is his refusal to distinguish between anthroposophy and theosophy. It's like they're not the same.
No.
Like Steiner broke off from Blavatsky for a reason. Stop treating them if like. For somebody who's so legalistic and a stickler for details, like, get that detail right.
Yeah,
they're not the same.
It's prejudice.
By the way, the difference is the difference specifically is Christ. Is the difference.
Yes.
Oh, absolutely. but Rudolf Steiner's theosophy is actually the same. I would call, there's a way to call what Tom Berg is doing theosophy also, because this is the kind of Christian theosophy that goes back to Jakob Burma, right? The wisdom tradition that runs through Christianity. It's in the German Rhineland mystics as well, right? And it's also in early. In fact, I'm going to do a course. I'm trying to figure out when, on the early 17th century Rosicrucianism, which is Thomas and Henry Vaughan. When I wrote my dissertation, the chapter on them is called "The Rosicrucian Mysticism of Thomas and Henry Vaughan," because if you read that stuff not through the lens of I think I know what it means, but you read that when I read those texts as kind of phenomenologically when I was working on my dissertation, I was like, wow, this is actually what my spirituality, because basically they were maintaining the two books, right? The book of nature and the book of scripture as both revealing God. And that's a lot what I talked about this weekend, right? Or last weekend. And that's my spirituality right there. And it's wholesome. It's holistic.
Well, I want to talk about that for a second. What happens when we decide that? What happens? What is the result of deciding that that only the book of Scripture reveals God and that the book of nature does not?
Well, then you can get into all kinds
of
stuff. I mean, which version of the book of Scripture? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I think what happens, Nate, is where we find ourselves. You end up in this reductionist, materialistic book world, right? Because if nature doesn't exist, at the conversation I had with Dominic, he said something that has stuck with me. He said, it's no wonder people are so miserable, because we were talking about reciprocal communication. I gave him the example of a baby that, in an experiment in the 60s, the baby's sitting in a chair and it's smiling and laughing at its mother, and the mother doesn't reciprocate. She just keeps a straight face. And the baby goes into this panic, right? And then Dominic said, well, that's interesting, because, no wonder we're in a panic and we're freaking out, because nature's not smiling back at us. And it's not smiling back at us because we don't think it's a person, right? We actually, we don't see it as a person. And I've said that, if all creation groans and waits, then it must be a person, because only a person groans and waits.
That's why I call it Sophia in exile, right?
Yes.
That's what the exile is.
Mm-hmm. And so, if you think that it's only the book that saves you, then you aren't. Then creation itself can't reciprocate to you.
Yeah,
there's communication there.
And I think, I think about this quite a bit, actually, because it's problematic if you're going to be a sola scriptura person, because that assumes. I mean, the assumption there is that the received text you have is the scripture, right? But it's not.
No.
Even Luther, our Protestant Reformation, they threw out the books that are now called Apocrypha. So I thought they were sola scriptura people. Well, it's not those scriptures.
Yeah.
And if you look at the Coptic Bible, also includes Enoch, and of course we know about all these other scriptures, whether they were Gnostic or not, or not the Gospel of Thomas, for instance, that were floating around as well. And there was no canonical text. There was nothing. In the age of Paul, there was no canonical text.
No.
Right?
There's a lot of
You're kind of just trying to figure out which ones to use.
Doesn't it seem to me that when you throw out the book of nature, you're throwing intuition out, because that is how you read the book of nature.
And you're throwing experience out, and then you're left with nothing but the left brain.
Right. Precisely.
And you can't speak from life. Right. Like for me, creation is life. And that's what it screams. It screams life in all its various forms, and fertility and abundance and all the rest of that. And if you don't interact with it, then you actually, I think, your words become dead because you're not speaking from your own experience of life itself.
And you're not, right. and if you're not listening, you cannot name things properly. Because then all of your names become arbitrary. Because the true names of things are given to you from the thing when you were listening to it. This is why Martin Shaw talks about like real myth, like real deep story, comes from the land and from listening to the land itself and what it has to say.
Right.
Well, and your interaction with it. See, this is the thing. Like MacDonald has this great line that science can tear apart the snowdrop, which is a little flower that peeks out of the snow like a crocus in the early spring. And it's pale. It's a white flower with light green on it. And it droops, right? It has a little head that droops. And he says, science can tear that apart, but it will never see that the snowdrop is talking about pale, confident submission and hope. Right? And that's the language of creation for me. Creation is talking to me about the story that I'm in. It's telling me the story that I'm in because it is the story.
And that's what, going back to where we started, that's what Teilhard is doing.
Is he?
Right. Oh yeah. In fact, his what's it called? I don't know what it's called. I think it's called Holy Wisdom. But it's like prose poem, really long prose poem that I reprinted in The Heavenly Country, which kind of goes through nature mysticism, Catholic mysticism approach to Sophia. That's going, yeah. Are we getting comments about that? The haters gonna show up yet?
Let's see.
There are people out there with alerts on their computers. When anybody mentions Teilhard, I have to get in there.
Here's the latest comment. Maybe before the canonical text was a world in the right brain. After canonical right veering to the left, analytical brain isn't dialectical sublimation, where you're flexible but to move between both.
Yeah, and I think that flexibility is right, Andrew. Thank you so much. And that's where I've been trying to figure it out, right? What is my relationship to the canonical text, whatever canon, right? And the thing is, what kind of messed me up that way was Margaret Barker. When she argued that actually, because the thing is, the myth that's handed down, right, is that it has never been changed. Yes, it has. What do you mean it's not been changed? The winners write history, right? And the thing is, and this is what I find compelling in Margaret Barker's argument, that the reforms of King Josiah that removed Sophia from the temple, which is where Barker's book, The Lady in the Temple, is about. And those Israelites, those true Israelites who didn't want to play that game anymore, left, and they went to North Africa, right? Which is where the wisdom literature, most of it was written through a book of Sirach and the Book of Wisdom. And it's also where Jesus went to live with his parents after Herod got wind of where they were going to be. That's where he was. That was the environment in which Jesus. That was the Judaism Jesus grew up with.
A mystical one.
Well, one of the heavy emphasis on the divine feminine.
Yeah.
If you read Wisdom Sirach, it's Sophia takes a big place in that.
Yeah.
So this messes y'all up, right? And but I think that's the difficult thing with doing this kind of biblical exegesis. I mean, which text, which redaction, which, you know what I mean? And we don't have access to that, so we just receive it through posterity and with the message, this is everything you need right here. But what if things were? I don't know.
It also narrows the conception of the word in a way that's very sad.
What do you mean by that? What word? Capital W word?
Yeah, the word. Yeah, right. Mm-hmm. Because what it does, because for people who think like that, they reduce the word to the word of God, by which they mean the biblical text. But the word is that which creates all thing. It is the logos in whose image the logoi of each thing is being made. There's nowhere where the word is not. So if you're confining your encounter with the word only to, like, let's say, like, take a really extreme naive example of it, like King James only Baptists, right? Mm-hmm. It's like that's not what it is. You should be seeking to encounter it everywhere.
Well, it's kind of interesting because, John says the word made flesh, right? And everybody loves the word. Nobody loves the flesh. Right? There's this disconnect. And I think it's interesting because to me that is the definition of incarnation, right? The word is breath, is spirit. Mm-hmm. And it isn't bodied until it becomes bodied, right? So the word made flesh is a descent into the body. And why? I mean, this is my whole thing, right? Why do we have a body? Because we can't experience the world without it. And we can't learn, we can't interact with creation, right? If we're just floating around like the wind, right? We're not having those experiences. We're not experiencing pain. So the two things can't be separated. The word is the word, but the word is not incarnate until it's made flesh, right? And I think we're doing that all the time. Like I was talking to Jed about, he was saying how, because we were talking about MacDonald's essay, and he said, so we're reincarnating George MacDonald right now. And I said, well, what if we're just incarnating him? Why do we have to reincarnate him? Because we're not becoming George. We're not George. I'm Shari talking, using his words, and his words are being made flesh.
It's like that scene in Excalibur. Remember Merlin comes back?
I don't remember. It's so long since I saw
Nate remembers.
Oh, yeah.
Your love brought me back. Yep. And this is the thing, is when you attend to a text like you're attending to George MacDonald, and this is, Simone Bay had this experience with George Herbert. I've had this with so many different writers. They become present.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Totally.
They become present. There's no doubt in my mind.
And Tom Burke talks about that in the book here. He talks about the calling forth, right? The remembering. He uses Lazarus as the example in that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, he talks about one of the things he talks about is that, like, the ultimate, like, purpose of the intuition, and the way he uses intuition, I think, maps on to the way MacDonald talks about the imagination. It's just that Tom Burke tends to prefer to use that. He does talk about imagination too, but he tends to talk about intuition more. But he says that it's that ability to identify. So it is the very same recognition that Barfield is talking about in that essay on East and West. The recognition that I am that. Like that is precisely the way in which the imagination is a truth-bearing faculty. It's the ability to bring you into that recognition, and for your ability to see as you're reading MacDonald's text that MacDonald can be brought to life, can be breathed to life through you.
Yeah, and this is
because it's not because what MacDonald is not alien to you.
I was asked to write an essay or contribute something on a volume about William Desmond in poetry. And apparently, I didn't realize this. I'm the only person who's ever written anything about that to date.
Really?
when in Incarnation of the Poetic Word, which he wrote this forward. But the thing he calls it, he doesn't call it, uses the term agapeic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote that essay on the possibility of an agapeic literary criticism, which is close to phenomenology, which means it comes straight out of Goethe, right? You approach it, whatever it is, with reverence and respect, rather than most of my colleagues in literary studies come at a text with an axe to grind. Let's see what this white supremacist asshole has to say about literature, right? That's what they do. Let's talk about your white privilege, or they're going to talk, they'll talk about it in Marxist terms or whatever they're going to do, but they come with it ready to slice it up in that way, right? So they come looking for a fight, and they don't know how to listen to the text, right? A text is not something somebody wrote. It's something that it's a cultural artifact. Just like you're doing some kind of archaeology, and it's a bullshit way to approach it, because the primary experience that we have of literature, I think, those of us who love it and get turned on by it as children or as young people, is that something opens up in us when we read it, right? And it's the same thing with scripture, same thing with attachment to nature, right? Something opens up in us. But the thing is, when we look at any of those things, and this is something I learned from Tomberg in this book, if we approach any of those things with this kind of scientific, impartial observer, I'm going to slice you up and see what makes you tick, you won't know anything about that object.
Yeah.
Not a thing. You won't learn a thing. You're only going to be, it's a form of idolatry, because all you're learning about is your own preconceptions.
Yeah, it's like you have to enter into the heart of the author and not the head, right?
You have to be present to it.
Yeah.
I think I try to, whatever I read, I try to make my first reading of whatever I'm reading sympathetic, in as much as I can. Because if I start reading it and immediately go into critical mode, I'm only going to see what I want to see. Because that's what critical mode does, by the way. Critical mode, when you're in critical mode, you're saying, I already have the correct worldview, and I am going to use that correct worldview that I already have in my head, and I'm going to impose it upon this text. And I'm not going to, and therefore I'm by definition incapable of listening to anything that I could possibly receive from this.
It's funny, because I've been thinking about this a lot, because I'm moving in these circles of people who have, how do I put it? They've learned how to be critical in this way, and I never did, right? And I'm the kind of person, I've always described myself as kind of slightly gullible. People, like, I fall into that trap often, where people will tell me something ridiculous and I'll be like, really? And I just believe, and I honestly don't know how to read something critically. What happens for me when I'm reading something is either it either grates against me in the wrong way, like it's a feeling, right, where I'm like, oh, this person, and I guess I kind of relate to George MacDonald in the sense that he says, if you're writing a story, a fairy tale, and you break that moral law, you try to call a good thing bad or a bad thing good, your story falls apart, right? And it seems like that's the only thing I have. Like, I don't have enough knowledge to say this person is wrong or right, but all I do have is this moral intuition that this story is falling apart, right? And that's it. That's all I have. And I don't know if I should try to hone a skill. Like, I really don't know. I don't know.
Shari, no, don't. You don't. Like, actually, so this is one of the things I appreciated when I was at Thomas Aquinas College, is that at Thomas Aquinas College, we are told never to read criticism. We always just approach the primary text first, and really only primary text. It's like understand the primary text, and then, you know, once you've read the primary text, like if you want to go and look up criticism after the fact, that's fine. But like it was just discouraged altogether. Mm-hmm. So I don't really think that there's a lot of value in the critical approach. So I don't think you should. The fact that you haven't learned it is good. Just don't ever learn it. Besides, it's so easy to do. I mean, it's not hard. Like tearing things down is easy. That's
so tell me about it.
So this is why I really think debate is a bad activity. I think it forms really bad habits. And this is why I think people don't like lawyers, right? Is that
they're sophists. Like they've just learned the art of argument. They can argue anything.
Yes.
But that's how propaganda works, right?
Yeah.
And I've been teaching students about this for decades. And there's something fundamentally wrong there. That's primarily what we teach kids in schools.
Yeah. Right?
Critical thinking.
We don't teach them imagination.
Yeah.
We don't teach them moral imagination, right? And which is why, and I see Andrew mentioned Vervaeke. I think that Vervaeke sees this. Vervaeke's a hyper-intellectual dude, but when he's talking about the meaning crisis, that's the meaning crisis, because what happens is if you have a culture of propaganda, debate, and analytical thinking, those things do not contribute to meaning, right? You need to come to meaning. You need something deeper, which is not available. This is why literature offers more meaning to people than scientific texts, right? Mm-hmm. Poetry, which is
because it's a it's a multivalent meaning. And you know, I just love the point that George MacDonald makes in his essay when he says that, you know, we don't create ex nihilo, God does, right? And so when he makes creation, he creates the thing, the forms, the representations out of nothing, and within each one of them is a meaning that is implicit, and it's within that thing that he made, and so if you recombine, which is our way of creating, right? Recombining the things that God's already made. If we remain within that moral law where we don't call things bad that are good and vice versa, then that it's always going to speak truth, right? But the meaning is going to depend on where you are in your life. Like I used the example, if you read a fairy tale at the age of 10, it's going to mean something different when you're 20 and 30 and 40, right?
Right.
And like George MacDonald says, he says, you know, because he has a question in the essay, you know, what if I don't get your meaning that you're trying to convey? What if I just get my own meaning? And then he says, why must you be so assured?
Right.
What is that? You know, like, what is it about us as individuals that think that, oh, we got to make sure we get it right, you know? And then he goes on to say that your meaning might be more superior to mine. Right?
It's interesting. Now you're making me think of, you guys read Jacques Maritain at all?
No.
A little bit.
No. He was a neo-scholastic, but he was deeply interested in poetry and in the way poetry, you know, works as prophecy and as source of meaning. In fact, a person he hung out with quite a bit was the French poet and artist Jean Cocteau, which is, I'd never put those two, and he was a big opiate addict too. I would never put those two guys together, but it made me think that at that time, the post World War I, post World War II generation of in particular Catholic intellectuals. I mean, we could also throw Bulgakov in here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like Maritain, and you can say von Balthasar. You put him in that category.
Yeah. Bulgakov was even in Paris from 1925.
Yeah,
I mean,
Louis Boynet. Why is it that, and even if you look at the psychoanalysis that was written at that time, Eric, what's his name, Viktor Frankl and Jung, even Freud, there was something going on in intellectual life at that time. I think prompted to some degree by the two wars, which talk about a meaning crisis, right? But for some reason, the writing is so much better than what you get not only is it's better writing, but it's in a way more poetic. I mean, if you read the first 90 pages of The Glory of the Lord by von Balthasar, it's one of the most beautifully poetic texts on the face of the planet. I'll never forget when I first read it. I was like, wow, this is theology? Okay.
That's how I feel about this is how I feel about the introduction to Bulgakov's Jacob's Ladder, which is like he just has this wonderful the introduction to that particular book, which is a book on angels. But he has this in the introduction. He basically lays out like the entirety of his theology in the introduction to that book, and he just does it in such a passionate and poetic way. It's extraordinarily beautiful. Like but people like if you don't read the whole book, just read it. Just read the introduction, and I'm fine.
It seems like all those people that you just mentioned, Michael, are they're taking what we call a deep dive, right? Like they're actually getting below the surface of things. I mean, even Jung's psychology is called depth psychology, right? And I think that's what Bulgakov's doing with theology. He's doing depth theology. And you even call your book Submerged Reality, right? There's this indication. And just yesterday when we did the imagination episode, there's a line in there where George MacDonald's talking about words, and he said words have length and breadth, but do they not also have depth? Right?
Right, depth. That's interesting. So the fact that you say depth is really that's very resonant with me. I'm actually since Michael's away, I'm going to share this. This is actually a page later on this afternoon. I'm talking to the author of this book.
Oh, cool.
Eugene Terrakin. Although his email says Evgeny, and I think Eugene is just the name he uses as a nom de plume. But this is just like a short portion of his book.
Yeah, let's hear it.
And the fact that you talked about depth, because like depth suggests a verticality, vertical dimension, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you in order to be able to go down, you also there also has to be an up. So you have to have layers. So there has to be a verticality too. This is from the first chapter of this book. The subheading for this is language as a portal into being. He says the Inklings believe when words are spoken aright, they invoke the invisible reality from behind the veil of the world. They affect what they name. For them, words are not primarily communication tools. They are not the things we use to convey a message. Strictly speaking, the message doesn't come through words. Rather, the words are the incarnation of the message, provided they are spirit-breathed. Yeah. Modern writers tend to think of language as a communication tool. Their only purpose is to use words to get the message across. So the choice of words becomes message-driven. You search for words just to get the reader to move on from one word to the next one horizontally, to bring them to the message as quickly as possible, i.e. propaganda, as Michael was mentioning, right? Peter Kreeft, a philosophy professor at Boston College, pointed out that in modern writing, words have lost their vertical static quality. Mm-hmm. Each word comes more from the preceding word rather than from the silence. It moves on to the next word in front of it rather than to the silence. Have you ever heard words that make you hold your breath for a moment or two? If you have, you know why the writings of J.R.R. Tolkien, C.S. Lewis, Owen Barfield, and other Inklings are so peculiar. They use words vertically, not to speed the reader on, but to allure them to the silence around the words. As Treebeard says, don't be hasty, Master Marriott.
Yeah. Yeah, and and George also calls them live things, right? Words are live things. And I think that's really interesting if you think about it in a vertical sense, because it is spirit, right? And then his characters he calls live souls.
Speaking of that, you see, Andrew just said depth, or what James Brown calls soul. And I think we got to take a moment to respect that. Here we are, the first time in this whole series where we've mentioned James Brown.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm going to get my funk on from this point.
Logoi and Sophia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way,
and
I share my birthday with James Brown, in case anybody wants to know.
Oh, really? Very interesting. Right. That's interesting. Guess who I share a birthday with? Muddy Waters.
All right.
Ooh. Muddy Waters. Both also born
you share a birthday with.
Also born April 4th.
Me, Waters. I'd have no clue. I have no. There's so many things I don't know, you guys. That's another one of them.
There's so the set of things that like any given person, the set of things that any given person does not know is always greater than the set of things that they know. So what's more important is like how well you know the things you know and how well you apply them. That's what matters. And I think you do pretty good on that front.
Well, back to this live thing with words. There's in Lilith, George MacDonald describes prayer, or he has a scene where the prayers are pigeons, right? And they fly up to God. And so that was what came to my mind when we were reading the essay yesterday and talking about words as live things and characters in his novels as live souls. Like he says, you can't meddle with live souls. Like you just don't dare, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, in order for words to be alive, like they can't be alive without, like, that's why I think Eugene talks about spirit breathed words, right?
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and the words have to have breath in order to be alive.
Yeah, but
that means you need the verticality too, because you need to have the space between them.
Right. So this is how I think about that. You have to experience life. And to experience life, you have to be in communion with creation. And that is when you start to speak spirit-filled words. Like George MacDonald says, when you clothe your thoughts with the representations of creation, with the forms, then you are no longer speaking. What's the verse about? I can't remember exactly anymore. It's just slipping my mind. But he actually cites the verse where it talks about speaking words of the spirit and not of the flesh. Mm-hmm. That verse, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to be grounded, like you really do. You have to have your feet planted in every organic sense of the word on the earth in order for your words to have spirit.
Right.
And so you abstract yourself away from creation in whatever way, scientifically or materialistically or hedonistically or whatever, and think that you have no relationship to it at all, then your words are dead.
As a very practical matter, based on what we've all just been saying, what you've just been saying, what does that say about how we should read?
Read? I'm not sure what you're getting at. I'm afraid I'll make a mistake.
No, there's no mistake. Just trust your intuition.
Well, I'm
right. No, there you go. See, you just went with it. Yes, that was where I was trying to direct. Yes, out loud. Yeah. Out loud.
Yes. Yeah, let them fly. Let those pigeon prayers
give them breath. Right. Yeah.
That's right.
No, yeah, the words are never fully alive as long as they just remain on the page. So even and you like even if you're just like breathing them out loud to yourself. Breathe them out loud.
I do it a lot for that reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're very practiced at it, and you do it well. And it makes the words come alive.
Mm. No, it's not that scripture. It's I could actually let me go find it. So
okay.
You know.
Well, anyway,
but that still supports. But it's like, but that still supports what we were just talking about, though.
But this is what you were talking about last weekend, Nate, when you're talking about your college poetry professor.
Yep.
Who said, "Dude, it's the image. Right. Poetry is made of images."
Yeah.
Right? Because that's I always tell students when I'm teaching creative writing, right, that you have to create a body for the spirit of your verse to inhabit. Right. Otherwise, it's never going to land. It's never going to incarnate. Never will take on flesh.
So it's that it's that combination of where the spirit and the image come together.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
I have it.
Yeah. Creative writing is that kind of incarnational act.
Yeah.
Or should be.
So here's where he says that. This is for Dali. Gazing about him in pain. So he's talking about a guy who can't just. He needs words. He needs language. He can't just communicate with his facial expressions, right? And gazing about him in pain, he suddenly beholds the material form of his immaterial condition. There stands his thought. God thought it before him and put its picture there ready for him when he wanted it. Or to express the thing more prosaically, the man cannot look around him long without perceiving some form, aspect, or movement of nature, some relation between its forms or between such and himself which resembles the state or motion within him. This he seizes as the symbol, as the garment or body of his invisible thought, presents it to his friend, and his friend understands him. Mm-hmm. Every word so employed with a new meaning is henceforth in its new character born of the spirit and not of the flesh, born of the imagination and not of the understanding, and is henceforth submitted to new laws of growth and modification.
Yeah, and actually John just mentioned here.
Yeah, this is a great point from John.
And I think that's right. And I think to tie this back to the meditations and the tarot, this is the difference between white magic and black magic.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
And how poetry and writing participates in it. And one of the things Maritain said, I can't remember what book it was, Poetry and Scholasticism or something. But one of the things he says is to create poetic images of sin, for instance, is like sending an angel of death amongst your brothers, right? It's like you and it kills them without a sound. So you make sin beautiful or appealing through the image, and it's a kind of black magic, and not just sin. I mean, sin, falsehood, right? It's a kind of sin. Lying is a kind of sin.
Yeah,
right? Which is why propaganda is inherently
because words really do have magical powers. So that's why this becomes and yes, they can be used for sorcery. Mm-hmm. And this is like, I think, so this is kind of like, I would say this is kind of the redeeming part of Protestant Christianity, elevating the sermon to the central part in its worship, which I think is mostly a problem. But there is the potential there for proper words to be breathed in the proper spirit. That really is like transformative. So that's the good part of it. Although it's not always that. No, sometimes it gets used for sorcery. Witness the televangelist. I have planes I need to buy. Send me money.
Boring, yeah. The kind of sorcery. I'm asleep.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
I mean, I
go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go.
I had nothing important.
No, you.
Yeah,
well, I'm just going to talk more about George MacDonald, so you better go.
That's totally fine.
Here's the weird
thing. I'm so immersed, like swimming in it. You
Here's
know,
the weird thing.
at the moment.
I've had that book, Meditations in the Tarot, right next to me for I don't know how long. No, I can't. Today I couldn't find it.
Oh, really?
Where the hell's that book?
Oh, really?
You know what?
Somebody
I
stole
put
it.
it. I think it's over in one of my other stacks too.
You got it. I got mine right here. What did?
Oh no, here it is.
Did you want me to?
It's like literally right next to me, and I couldn't find it.
Do you want me to look something up, Michael?
No, I just thought it was ironic. Maybe it's because Anselm sent over some theosophical hunters. We got to do a theosophy B&E, okay?
Theosophy B&E, I love it. Oh man!
Oh
I
my
don't
goodness!
think people say B&E anymore, Michael.
Oh,
you totally dated yourself with B&E.
Really? Wait, people don't say that anymore?
I don't know. I haven't heard it forever, but I just remember it being
I literally don't know. That's that's funny. Oh my gosh!
I don't either, really.
I still can't stop cracking up about that. Theosophical B&E. Oh man.
So I'm gonna read something out of this afterward from Balthazar. He's talking about origin, and I'll just read the whole thing and then I'll pose my question. Origen, in particular, completing this line of thought, undertook as a Christian to elucidate not only the pagan philosophical wisdom in the light of biblical revelation, but also the wisdom of the rulers of this world, quote, 1 Corinthians 2:6, by which he meant the so-called secret wisdom of the Egyptians, especially Hermetic writings, supposedly written by Hermes Trismegistus, the Egyptian god Thoth. He also had in mind the astrology of the Chaldeans and Indians, which purports to impart knowledge concerning supersensible matters, and nothing less than the manifold teachings of the Greeks concerning the divine. He believed it possible that the cosmic powers, rulers of this world, do not bring their wisdom to human beings in order to harm them, but because they themselves hold these things to be true. Similar ideas are to be found in the works of Eusebius. So I thought that was interesting in light of all the, worries about demonic things. Origen believed it possible that the cosmic powers, rulers of this world, do not bring their wisdom to human beings in order to harm them, but because they themselves hold these things to be true. You guys want to expand on that for me? Is he saying that it's not deliberately deceptive, but it's deceptive by nature of them believing that what they're saying is true?
It's deceptive in that if it's deceptive in the same way that idols are deceptive, right? It's not like that. So it's not like the beings that are worshipped through idol worship are not gods, right? It's that if you focus on a lower god instead of the highest principle, you are going to only get a portion of the truth. It's not even that what you're getting is false. It's that you're only getting a narrow part of it. So here's what I've been thinking about this. This is actually the same. By the way, Shari, this you brought up the exact same thing I was going to bring up, and this is something I've been thinking about a lot lately. And it has to do with this idea of us as microcosm and the macrocosm relationship, and how and the link between the idea of principalities and powers and the gods. And I would say that the way I've been thinking about it lately is that the gods are both principalities and powers that are out there in the cosmos, but they are also at work within us. Mm-hmm. Right? So, I talked about this in our estuary leader support meeting this week, and Corey was talking about the phenomenon of soldiers entering a berserker rage.
Yeah.
And like I said that is what that is a manifestation of Mars in that person. Like they are manifesting Mars.
Yep.
or Wotan or whatever. I mean, like
the warrior.
There's a reason why the pagans easily map their gods to one another, because they were all talking about the same cosmic forces. So that's why that mapping of like
right.
Mars to Wotan, is the kind of thing that pagans could do easily and have no problem with it, because they understood what they were talking about were like these cosmic forces. Mm-hmm. And so they are both out there in the cosmos, but they are also within us. And the answer to the problem of the warring of the gods for both the macrocosm and the microcosm is to be under Christ, because Christ makes everything better. So then when the gods are properly ordered under Christ, then instead of being dangerous idols that can lead you astray, they become properly ordered energies under the Logos that you can then manifest for good.
Yeah, this is like this is reminding me of that section of Apocalypse of St. John by Emile Bock, where he talks about bridling the passions, or bridling the Luciferic and the Aramonic, right? Like you don't, and this is the thing, like,
and it's not bridling them, and it's not because that they're just bad and we want to kill them all. No, it's like they need to be trained and ordered under Christ so that they can be used properly for the good.
A person who has a passionless life is chronically depressed.
Right.
Like,
right.
It's a nothing life.
That was actually
Zero life.
That was one of my unique fears back when I stepped upon this path of becoming what's in the Odyssey, like the island of the lotus eaters, right?
Mm.
These spiritual vegetables. I'm just blissed out, man. Just
yeah.
Check it out. Yeah. I think that's why marijuana was legalized in this country.
Yeah.
Well, because I think that's true. It dampens initiative and that good I don't call it Mars energy, call it Saint Michael the Archangel energy, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
And which is what Tom Burke does in the book, right?
Right.
And even that, remember, he changes the attributions of the days of the week, that not only is Tuesday the day of Mars, but it's also the day of he calls him the archive strategist Michael, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he goes further with that, which those kind of correspondences, especially the first time I read this book, kind of enlivened me, because right, that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah,
is a warrant, and that's why I wrote the chivalric reel a few months ago. That's the whole point of that, was how I don't like. I mean, unfortunately, I think what happens, especially in these online communities, is that Mars energy or that Saint Michael energy gets subverted into really ugly polemics.
Mm-hmm.
And just stupid intellectual, brinksmanship.
Yeah.
Which just turns me off. I can't stand it. I don't like it in academia. I don't like it on Twitter.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it's authentic, because, everybody's brave behind a keyboard, right?
It starts sounding like Charlie Brown's teacher to me. Sometimes I open up these different online communities and I just hear wah 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 wah. I'm like, okay, guys.
Come out. Yeah, I don't know. I can't even go there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's something about that, like that entire thing, that entire dynamic bothers me, because I think, just like in any war forces you to dehumanize your enemy in order to be able to kill your enemy, and that's no less true of the culture war than it is of any other war. And that's why it all gets so gross and ugly. It's like,
yeah, and it's not born of the spirit, but born of the flesh, right? You're not taking the forms. You're not speaking poetically. You're speaking propositionally, and that there's no, according to what I was talking about earlier, there's no connection to the spirit there. Like,
well, and a lot of it is like that we're so caught up in the battle that we miss moments of possible connection when they could occur. Let me give you a real world example. The beautiful home that I stayed in for the DC conference, as Michael mentioned, I made dinner for everybody. I had to get permission from the property owner to do that because the standard policy was no gatherings of more than 4 people. Rather than just try to get away with something, I just contacted her. I just contacted her up front and said, "Hey, I'm going to this conference. This is what this conference is about. It's just going to be a bunch of people like having an intellectual conversation over food with some wine, and it won't be more than 6 people." And she messaged me back and she checked out the conference and she said, "What a beautiful conference. I would be more than happy to support this. I hope you leave your prayers behind for me."
oh wow.
Okay. So a lot of people noticed that. A lot of people noticed, like a couple of, I don't know if Michael noticed, but several people noticed and commented that as they entered into the home, there was a Black Lives Matter flag that was like on the outside of the home. And after I left, the owner like let me know who she was. Because I sent her a message, like I was trying to find the trash because I wanted to take even though it wasn't on the checkout instructions, I felt bad about leaving a full trash bag behind, so I wanted to find the outside trash. And just say, "Hey, I just wanted to take the outside trash out," and I wasn't able to find the outside trash. And she said, "Oh, that's very sweet." And then she told me it was in the alley. And then she said, I hope you left. I hope you enjoyed your conference, and I hope you left some prayers behind." And I said, "Not only did I leave my prayers behind, but I also had both a Catholic priest and a Christian Reformed minister here who also left prayers behind in your home. Thank you for being so gracious." And so she said, she gave me her name and she said, "Google me, and you'll find out, like you'll be surprised to find out who I am, and you will see why it's important to me that you leave your prayers behind." And I Google her. And it turns out that she's an activist. She's an activist who lost her son. She lost her son. Her son was a football player at Duquesne University, and he leapt from 16 stories to his death after an encounter with campus police. And she never got any satisfactory answers from the campus police as to the circumstances of her son's death. And so finally, after 2 years of wrangling with them in 2020, she started a hunger strike.
Wow.
And became an activist because she was trying to draw attention to, like, not only what had happened to her son, but to other people who had experienced extreme loss. So here's this person that a lot of people that are more invested in the culture war side of things that are around in this corner of the internet, they would automatically just like have written this person off and not wanted to engage with them at all. But through my communication with her, I found out she approved of our conference, thought it was beautiful, and asked for me to leave my prayers behind for her and the tragedy that she'd been through.
Wow, that's a good story.
Right. So yeah. I mean, this is why this is an example of why that getting into that bunker mentality is just terrible. Like we cannot lose the ability to listen to each other and hear people's stories. We may still have disagreements at the end of the day, but as long as we're able to sit down with each other and see a human face on the other side of us, that changes everything.
Yeah, well, this is why I'm constantly harping on it's not what we talk about, but how, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's the essence of the connection that you make is how you go about these things, not if the how is good.
By the way, Shari, I love that you do that. I really appreciate it so much because you do it in such a delicate way where you just gently remind people like to pay attention to how they're talking. And by the way, what you were always pointing out there is when people are going into what they're doing when you're pointing that out is they're going into critic mode. They're going into critic mode. They're tearing down. And a lot of times it's not really just ideas they're tearing down. It's people they're tearing down.
Look, guys, I have to take off and drive my daughter to work.
Okay.
No problem, Michael. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Goodbye, all your guests, John, Dolly, Zacarias, and I know there's other people. Andrew, have a good one. Take care.
Hey, Michael, I'll be in touch about the next project soon.
Sounds good. Okay.
All right.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye, Michael.
Well, we can keep talking, Shari. I can open the chat and see if anybody wants to hop in here.
Yeah, there was something I wanted to say about
go for it.
What you just said there. I'm trying to remember what it was now. Oh well, it's gone. It took off like a little pigeon.
Yeah. I think I think this is a good note to end it.
I think so too.
I think that feels right to me.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone who joined us this morning.
Yeah, Nate, I just want to say thank you. Thank you very much. You got me through this book. It's a big one.
Shari. Oh, I should announce what's next.
Yeah, what is next?
Okay. So after some long thought, the next series we're going to be doing is going to be a long series called Transformation of the Eros. And we're going to start with the Divine Comedy.
Are we?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I guess I'm going to be reading the Divine Comedy.
You'll be reading the Divine Comedy. I'll be in touch.
Okay.
But yeah, we're going to start with the Divine Comedy. And I think I want to do Charles Williams' figure of Beatrice, but I think I want to wait until after we've read the Divine Comedy. So let's actually just let's start again. Primary text first, right? Start with the primary text. We'll discuss the Divine Comedy, and then we'll move on to some of the other books.
I'm doing a great books course with Nate Heil.
One of which is going to be Soloviev's Transformation of the Eros, which is where I got the title.
Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah, and Hans Urs von Balthasar talks quite a bit about Charles Williams in that afterward.
He does.
And he made me want to dig into that guy a little bit.
And Charles Williams is what inspired me for what we're going to do in our next series. And that was just like I hadn't made the official decision that was going to be our next thing.
Yeah.
And then I read Van Balthasar's afterward, and I'm like, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
You just confirmed where I was already at it. It was like when you brought up that exact same section from the afterward that I was planning on talking about.
Yeah.
Because we were both wanting to talk at the same time. Like that, I was going to bring up the same exact thing.
Really, eh?
There's that beautiful Canadian accent. God bless you, Shari.
You too. And thanks everybody for joining us.
Thanks everybody.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.